Today we are serving welcome to February Valentine's Day look. If you love it, let me know in the description. If you hate it, comment that on someone else's video because I don't really do well with constructive criticism. Hello and welcome to my January wrap-up. This is my first wrap-up here on the channel. First, I guess, kind of full month that I've been doing this. So let's just get into the books. I read 12 books this month, which is a lot for me, but as I've mentioned in several other videos, I'm currently unemployed. So that gives me a lot of free time to do things such as read and film YouTube videos and read. Our first book, well actually you didn't read this, maybe you did read it, but my first book that I finished in January was Funny You Should Ask by Elisa Sussman, and I gave this one a 4 stars. This is a rom-com type book, and the premise for it is that we meet our main character who is a journalist, and she's writing an article about the new James Bond to try and put him in a better light because his casting is a bit controversial because he's American, he's the first American Bond, and she's trying to, make him look cool and suave, and they really hit it off during the first interview, and they end up spending a whirlwind weekend together, and it really kicks off her career and also kind of makes him look better because he, really comes off James Bondy because everyone thinks they fornicated. We meet up with them 10 years later. He has done his whole acting career. It's kind of bombed because he's had issues with addiction, and her career is going pretty well. She's a successful author, and to try and reboot his career, his team has asked her to come interview our buddy again, and let's see if some romance ensues. I liked this book because it was cute and it was very refreshing to read a romance type rom-com book where, the characters were acting like adults because they are adults, and that was refreshing. From what I understand, this book is based on a GQ interview that Chris Evans did that I guess, people thought there was a little romance going on between the journalist and Chris Evans, and I will read anything tangentially related to Chris Evans. And this whole book, I was picturing Chris Evans, so I was having a great time. So if you're looking for a funny rom-com, I'd recommend this. I think this was funnier than, your average, cartoon cover rom-com book. The next book I finished was actually the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I finished my reread/re-listen of Harry Potter that I'd started last year. I'm always listening to an audiobook that I've heard before or read before because I find that's the best way for me to consume audiobooks. I don't always get the most out of it when I'm listening to it because a lot of the times I'm doing other things or I'm falling asleep. So that's my way of, still being able to listen to audiobooks without, not understanding a single thing that happened. So finish that. Not going to give that a review because I don't really need to at this point. But I will say that the title of The Deathly Hallows is my least favorite title of all the Harry Potter books. I thought it was stupid. And when the book came out, I was probably 8 when they announced the title. And I was so angry. I was like, that's the stupidest name I've ever heard. Deathly Hallows in Harry Potter? Let's be a little more whimsical, okay? And it was all downhill from there. The next book that I finished in January was Atomic Habits by James Clear. This was another audiobook that I listened to, but I found this one was a bit easier to follow because of the way that it was structured. So James Clear is a habit expert, and this is his a compilation of all of his, theories and tips on habit building and habit breaking. I thought it was super interesting. I don't need to improve myself, so I won't be taking any of the tips. I'm kidding, I do need to improve. I really like the way that this book was structured because he goes through, he has all of his laws and then sub-laws of habits and how to break them and how to form them. And then at the end of each chapter, he goes through a bullet point system of everything he talked about, which was super helpful being an audiobook listener because I might have listened to it a long time ago and I don't remember what happened, so that was helpful. And then he would also recap the rest of the rules that he'd introduced at the end of each chapter. And there's also a lot of guides online that he published. There's a lot of online resources, so those were helpful as well. I think this is a great one to listen to if you want to learn a little bit more about habit forming. I don't necessarily take what self-help books tell me to do and do them. I just kind of like to be inspired and then never think about it again. but this was a good one. I gave it a 4. The next book I finished in January was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And I gave this one, I would say a 4.5. This is a 4.5. This one was really difficult to get through because it's about, a really uncomfortable topic to read about. So this book is about a student-teacher relationship. Our main character, Vanessa, is at a really prestigious boarding school in Maine, and she starts a relationship, not a relationship because she's a minor, it's not a relationship, it's abusive, with her English teacher. And in our current timeline, all of those allegations of him having dated students, slept with students, is all coming to the forefront in like a Me Too era setting. And Vanessa's trying to reconcile the relationship that she had with this teacher, her opinions on it, and like what the rest of the world thinks of it. I thought it was a super interesting way to expand on this story. It definitely wasn't glorifying it at all, which I found very refreshing. So our Vanessa, she has a really complicated relationship with it because at the time she thought she was like all in. Like she's like, yes, I love this man. I'm consenting to everything. There's no way this can be abusive because I want it just as much. And a lot of that's coming from what he's telling her, and he's gaslighting her and abusing her. It can be difficult to get through some points in this book because you can see the obvious abuse going on and you feel horrible for this poor girl, and the way it ends, like for her at school, is horrible. But I think it's a really important book to be out there because there's a lot of misleading information about what student-teacher relationships look like. I'm specifically thinking of a certain Pretty Little Liars couple that really misleads people on what student-teacher relationships are like. You should marry your teacher. He's abusive.
She meets Ezra Fitz, the crust lord of the millennium.
But yeah, I think the way that this book is able to like tell this story authentically is that every time Vanessa's in the past telling us about her experiences with her teacher, she's kind of trying to make us believe that she's up for it, but also in the way that it's written, you can see the abuse happening. She's like, well, he told me this. I didn't feel that way, but he told me this is how I felt. Now I feel like that. The author uses like kind of that unreliable narrator so that we can get both sides. So we can see that she really believes that this is a good relationship. We also, as adults, know it's abusive, but we can also see it's abusive by the things he says and the way she reacts to them. It's a hard read. I don't think it's going to be for everyone, but like I said, I think it's a super important book to be in the universe to counteract a lot of false narratives about these very abusive relationships. The next 3 books I read were the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I'm not going to explain the plot of these books because it's like Harry Potter. It's like I think everyone knows. And if you don't know, what got me on this reread was, 1, I finished my Harry Potter reread, so I needed something. 2, I started rewatching the movies with my friends, and I was like, yeah, I want to return to those books. So I listened to them all on audiobook, and it was very quick because these books are actually really good. They hold up so well. I think the strongest of the series are the first 2, and that's kind of always been the consensus, is like Mockingjay is it's different. It's like a war book versus the first 2 are, Hunger Games books. But the third one's still really good. I enjoyed all of my reread. I think I enjoyed it more now than I did when I first listened to it. I was a little late to the party because I was not like other girls. So I didn't read popular books. I read unique books, like The Click. That's true. I read the whole Click series. But yeah, I think I'm gonna do a longer video on this and another book I'll mention later, so I'm not gonna go into a ton of my thoughts, but if you haven't revisited the series and you are a fan, definitely go for it because it holds up. The next book I finished in January was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and this was a pretty good month for reading. This was another 4/4 to 4.5 star book for me. So this book is about our main character, Bree, who is 16 years old and is going to UNC Chapel Hill in like an accelerated high school / college program, and her mom has recently died. So she enters the school, having a little she's going through it. She's going through it. And you know what she needs when she's going through it? Magic, demons, boys, what every girl needs when she's got trauma. It took me a while to get into it. Like I find the first 100 pages of any fantasy book are hard to get through, and this was kind of the same for this. I was like, what is going on? I think they did a good job of kind of like easing you into it. I read another book later this month that was like, bam, bam, fantasy, words you don't understand. But this one was a little bit more of like an ease into it, just to get into our mindset and get to know Brie a little bit better before we, go through everything that happens in this book. This book, I wrote in my notes, this book kind of gives me A Court of Thorns and Roses vibes, and I do mean that in a good way. That's actually a compliment, because there's a lot of twists and turns. When you get to the end of the book, it's nothing that you would have anticipated at the beginning of the book, which I think makes for a good fantasy. I'm very excited to read the sequel. I have it from the library, so I'm gonna read that in February. My next read of January was still on my dark academia grind, and it was actually another 4 to 4.5 star read. This one was very different though. This one is Bunny by Mona Awad, and it is again in that dark academia world, but like on the complete other side of the spectrum of Legendborn. Like they are in the same genre, but they're not friends. This book is it just happens. You just gotta go for it. You kind of gotta jump in blind and just be along for the ride, because I don't want to explain what happens to you. You just gotta get through it. So our main character, Sam, is a writer, and she's going to college in this very prestigious fiction writing program, and the rest of her cohort are all women, but they're in this clique, and they all call each other Bunny, and they're like high femme, pink. I'm wrapping my bunny fit. It's very like if Mean Girls and like Heathers and like Crazy, all of those mixed together. That's kind of what this book is. It's supposed to be like a takedown of Popular Girls. I didn't really get that. I guess I did, but I would just go into this. If you like weird books, this is a high recommend for me. Next book I finished, was Divergent by Veronica Roth. And this was this is connected to my Hunger Games reread, because I was like, well, I finished Hunger Games, why don't I just do Divergent? Because they're the same thing, right? No. I'm joking when I say that. Of course I know Divergent and Hunger Games are different, because Hunger Games is good. I must be misremembering this book. I think what was interesting the first time was the mystery of like, is she gonna, is Triss, our main girly, gonna actually become Dauntless? Because like there was serious times there where it seemed like she was gonna just flunk out and become, factionless. I thought the faction system was really cool when I first read this book, but if you give it an iota of critical thinking, it just kind of falls apart. It's like, so you're telling me that only one group of people gets to be smart and everyone else is just stupid? I don't even know what to say about this. I think I'm gonna leave it at that, because I'm so confused. I'm currently listening to Insurgent. I'm like halfway through and I'm like, what is going on in this book? She just keeps going around and just doing things. Everywhere she goes, everything gets worse. But yeah, I'm reading it. The next book I read was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. The only other Leigh Bardugo I've read is The Ninth House, so I didn't really know what I was getting into, because I know she's a classic YA fantasy girly and I haven't read any of her books. I have Six of Crows and want to read it. Didn't know it was after Shadow and Bone, so I'm reading that first. I'll be honest, I didn't plan on reading this book. Not sure why I read this book. I just saw that it was available on my library, on my Kobo, so I was like, sure. Okay, I'll take that book. Let's just say confusion was the name of the game with this one. Like I said, remember how Legendborn kind of like eases you into everything? This one doesn't. It doesn't ease you in at all. I had no idea what was going on the whole time, and I still don't know what's going on. So that's why I have to read the second book, so maybe I can figure it out. But if you haven't heard of this book, the plot is confusing. I think there's too many magic words for me, And they're not just magic words, they're like magic Russian words, magic Polish words. And I'm confused. Very confused. So the plot is girl. Girl lives in poverty. Girl is orphan, of course. Girl is poverty orphan. Girl finds out she has magic power that can save the world. Who'da thunk it? And then she gets taken away by the government, of course, by the Darkling, who is the head magic man. And he's a good guy, but his name is the Darkling? No. One of the things that I think that ruined my reading experience was the fact that I got this from my library on my Kobo, and I just kind of started reading it. I didn't really do any research. I didn't look at the chapters. I didn't look to see how long is this book actually, because you know when you pick up those books from like on your Kobo or e-reader, and sometimes the last 50 pages is just like random crap that's not actually the book. Usually I would check that and make sure to see how many pages of this Kobo book are actually the story. I didn't do that this time, and I was like, we're really plowing through this book. Like, we're at like page 500 of 1050, and I feel like we're way past the midpoint. We're like in the last act of this book, and then all of a sudden at page 750 the book ended, and I was like, we got 300 pages left. Like, what is going on? I was so confused the whole time because it's already super fast paced. But if you think that this is a 1,000-page book and it's just going bam, 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 it's so confusing. I think maybe too much happens in this book that you're not able to settle with any of it. So the last 300 pages of my copy on my Kobo was excerpts from The Next in the Shadow and Bone, and then Six of Crows, and also just, I think, like reader's guide. Maybe I should have read the reader's guide. That probably would have helped a lot. I am gonna read the second book. I think I'm gonna finish the series if I like the second book, because I gotta figure out what the hell I read. Otherwise, what was the point? I don't have a rating for it. I don't have one. I don't know what happened. I know this is gonna make me sound really stupid because that's a young adult book and I am an old adult book. So I should understand. I don't. So after that fantasy fiasco, the last book I finished in the month of January was The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. This book, I gave it a 3-star. It's the second book in the Off-Campus series. I actually, in my last video, recommended The Deal, which is the first book in the series, which is way better. This book focuses on our characters Grace and Logan, who Logan we met in the first book. Grace is like a good girl freshman, and Logan is the hottest, most hockey player at the school, except for the other people he lives with, who are the exact same. So initially, Logan and Grace meet by accident, and they have a night of fun. He is thinking about her a lot, she's thinking about him a lot, but they have no way of like seeing each other, and then they happen to run into each other again, and they kind of like, they just can't get it together. They are just really struggling to communicate. He has a crush on his best friend's girlfriend, who is the couple in the first book, and he's like, I can't be with her because I'm so in love with Hannah. So long story short, he kind of just goes like, yeah, I can't, this isn't really right for me, and she's like, I'm done then. And then he's like, wait, actually I really like you, because he sorts himself out in a second. He tries to get her back. They go over the summer, and they come back from summer, and he's like, I really want you back. She's like, okay, well, you need to do tasks for me. And I don't know. I just found this book they just didn't have like the best chemistry, especially compared to the first book. I'll have to check out the third one because that one has better reviews, I believe, on Storyground. Like, this one's like a 3.2 or something, and the next one's like a 4. So I'd still recommend The Deal. If you want to read the series, maybe stick with The Mistake. I'll let you know how the rest of the books go, because I'll read them slowly throughout time. But yeah, this isn't the best one. Not my fave. So yeah, that was today's video. If you liked it, please subscribe. If you have read any of these books and want to share your thoughts, please let me know in the comments down below, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye!